I've always had a guiding principle as an educator from my first day in the classroom. What we do in our classrooms in our school every day should be good enough for our own child.
You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, George Valenzuela.
This is education coach George Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it.
We're here today with the one and only Mike Mattos. Mike is a well-known education consultant, speaker, and author. And I'm very happy to have him on the show because I happen to be a very big fan. How are you?
I am great. Honored, truly honored, humbled, privileged to be part of your podcast. Ever since I had the opportunity both to read your work and watch you teach, we had a chance to work together at the last PLC at Work Summit. When I got the invitation, I thought, I'm going to be on the podcast of a rising star in education. So that humbled, my friend, humbled.
For the audience, I've been following Mike for a few years, and I love how he explains the history of professional development. I also love his keynote style. It's very similar to mine because we facilitate our keynotes in the teaching style. I had the pleasure of sitting in Mike's keynote at this year's PLC at Work Summit. And Mike, you are awesome. Much respect to you, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Coming from a teacher like you, I think that's the highest praise. Your intro was very kind, and yet I don't think it captured what I'm most proud of. And I think what makes me effective when I teach and learn with teachers now, and that's this. I'm a practitioner. I'm not a researcher. I am very appreciative of people who spend their career researching what works in schools in a clinical, objective way. My expertise is how do you implement that? I spent 22 years on site, mostly as a teacher, as a site administrator. The question of how do you take what's proven to work and implement it in a real life school with limited resources, with diverse student needs, and do it within your contractual days. You're not asking more of educators. That's where I've spent my life. So your question about professional development, I've deeply studied the history of educational PD in America as much as I take off my consultant hat now and I put on my educator hat. For 22 years, I was the receiver of professional development. And at some point, I looked back in my career and I became the this too shall pass kind of guy. But the reason why is because my experience was we never stuck with anything. In my current keynote for the PLC at Work Institutes, and the one I used at the summit, I think you're referencing, is I just completed my 37th year in public education. And wow. I go through kind of the major movements that I went through. I was trained to be a teacher during Madeline Hunter times. You couldn't get a job unless you quoted Hunter at that time, right? My ed prep program prepped me well, and I started my classroom lacking experience, but at least some pedagogy structures to build upon. Start with an anticipatory set, and then I do, we do, you do. Within 2 years, like that was off the plate in the district that I was in. We had a new soup, and all of a sudden, higher level thinking skills was the thing. And for 2 straight years, all of our PD and our teacher observations were about using Bloom's taxonomy to help kids get to higher levels of thinking. I would just start to get pretty good at that. And then was like, no, not that. Now it's cooperative learning. You're not the sage on the stage teacher. You're the guide on the side. Kids need to lead their own learning. I went to a Kagan Cooperative Learning Conference, and that was 2 years. And then what? Technology. Technology is the answer. You need to learn how to use technology inside your classroom for like 3 years. That was the push of the district that I was in. Then that was off the plate. Why? No child left behind passed. So then it was, what does that high stakes test look like? We should be giving kids questions in the format they're going to see on that state test and focus on the strands that come up most in the blueprints of those state tests. And that was a few years. And then that was off the table. Why? Now we can't trust teachers anymore to teach. Get a program and have teachers follow it with fidelity. And that's when I went to admin. So all of a sudden it was like, walk through each teacher's classroom. They should be scripting on the same pace. And if not, you're not doing your job, instructional leader. And then it turned into walkthroughs. I'm going to walk through and coach teachers and eval teachers. It seemed like every time when I was a teacher, I had a new principal or a new soup or a different party took over the governorship in my home state of California, or a new president came in, because I came in and started teaching when Reagan was president. So I've gone through Republican, Democrat, like all bets are off. I think lots of teachers enter PD with hope. Like, I hope I can glean a few things I might be able to use in my classroom, but they don't fully commit to whatever the newest research is or the focus is, because their commitment won't be rewarded with ongoing support to get great at it. So we never get great at anything. And then the last piece is this. There's only one thing in my 37 years in education where not only we've stuck with as a profession, but every year the research that supports it and the number of schools that are getting great results doing it has been now over 20 years. And that's the professional learning community at work process. It didn't come and go, this too shall pass. It has continued to be validated as best practice. And if we'll stick with it over time and let teachers get great at it, we can really reap a lot of wonderful results, both for student learning and adult learning. So
one of the things I notice about our country is that policing, hospitals, and the military have systems, have protocols, have boot camp, have ways of doing things, but education really doesn't. It has standards and it has funding, and then you have to figure it out. Unless you have an administrator, a coordinator, a principal, someone at the school that is really passionate about helping young people learn and be engaged at the same time, unless we have that, then we're not really going to move the needle. I do want to get into PLC at work.
You bring such a great point there. Let me add a piece to that too. I don't care what the organization is. If you are a firehouse or if you are a hospital or if you're a doctor's office, would you agree with this? To be great, it takes effective leadership.
Oh, yes.
Not just systems, but effective leadership that builds the right culture, B, can effectively share the why behind whatever the change that has to happen to improve, and give people the training, the time, the support, and to have the maintained focus of here's our core mission. Here are the practices that are going to help us get there. Here are the practices that are holding us back. We have to have the courage to let go and continually get better and build that shared leadership where those that you serve as a leader feel part of the process instead of minions to carry out the work of others. You can have protocols within a profession to help focus on best practice, but ineffective leadership will always undermine whatever systems are in place because you're not doing it well.
I agree. One of the worst things that I've experienced and that I try now to prep administrators for is, hey, if you're bringing me in, it's not my job to convince your people. You need to do the legwork. You need to mend fences if you need to, instead of volunteering people. And when we do the professional development, you have to be a part of it. A good leader is going to lead by modeling, showing what to do. And when you don't know what to do, that's why you bring us in, then you learn alongside your colleagues. That's really the only way to really be a leader, is to be in the thick of it, be with them, learn what they're learning, and then be able to hold them accountable, but in a positive way. A lot of times I found that folks don't attend any of the PD, they don't do any of it. And then on the next PD day, now they're saying, hey, did you implement what George said? And then if they didn't, now they get in trouble. That really doesn't make sense.
When I left the principalship and started to make my full-time job to be learning with adults, supporting educators, and most of my work at that time was on site. I spoke far less at events and a lot of PD on site. And the first year, I was like 200 days on the road working with schools. So a lot, and a lot of district-wide trainings. Ask me the first year, how many superintendents actually stayed for the training?
How many?
4.
Oh, Lord.
In the whole first year. You know, think about it. The superintendent, the leader should be the lead learner, right? And your presence makes a difference. You're showing this is so important. I'm going to learn this with you. And I was surprised. We say we're going to implement this best practice across our entire system. I'll make enough time to introduce it. Hi, all. Here's our speaker. Here's our topic for the year. But I have more important things to do, is what your time is saying. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there are a lot of demands upon leaders, but is there anything more important than supporting, modeling, and learning with the people on the front lines in your school and district, teachers? I was so surprised that so few actually invested their time, even if they were a PLC expert, The 4 superintendents that were there, I kept in touch with them. Why? Because that's where real change happened. Because they were in the trenches, rolling up their sleeves, and their teachers felt very supportive, and they were attuned to the missteps because they were right there with what was going on.
If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors.
We had the pleasure of listening to George this morning on project-based learning, and he shared his story that his aunt encouraged him to go into education. And she was absolutely right. He is so talented at sharing information in a way that's easy to digest and is inspiring to go back and actually implement and make change.
So my takeaway is that Mr. Valenzuela was very inspiring. He was very motivational and helped me to think about a new way of getting my teachers excited.
When I set out to do a workshop, my key deliverable is energy. And this momentum is used to make connections, inspire, educate, and ultimately transform the audience, so that they're compelled to take that same energy back to their schools and communities. And although we have fun, we tackle the hard topics of today, like educational policy, pedagogy for improving curriculum and instruction, and empowering today's students by connecting our work to the needs of the workforce. So please consider Lifelong Learning Defined for your next keynote, workshop, or conference, and overall instructional and educational coaching needs. My name is George, and I hope to connect with you soon.
We would love to have him come and do some work with us and help us be a little more successful and help our students to be more successful.
I move around a lot of schools, and we're seeing a huge disconnect. A lot of teachers that have come from non-traditional pathways, especially in the past few years. And so just interactions, expectations is really the first step. All of my teachers, raise your right hand, and please repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my students. All of my administrators, all my directors, all my principals, all my coordinators, raise your hands, please, your right hand, and repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my faculty and staff. Thank you.
Mike, you're very well known in education, but tell us your backstory. How did you get into education, and what steps did you take to get where you are now as an education consultant?
I was very fortunate. I grew up in a small town. I had phenomenal teachers. The town is 29 Palms, California. I grew up in a town of 4,000 people. We have 2 major streets and a red flashing light in the middle when I was a kid. But the cool thing is everyone knows you. Everyone knows everyone in a small town. Oasis Elementary School, 29 Palms Junior High and high school. I just can't tell you how many teachers had a huge impact upon me. I can count on one hand the number of teachers I thought maybe you weren't the most effective. Maybe this wasn't the right profession for you. That was like the way exception. It wasn't like I was that person that's like, so I knew from an early age I wanted to be a teacher. No, my dad is a business owner. I thought I would take over the family business. I went off to college planning to major in poli-sci and go into business someday with my father. But there was an interim class in college, a 1-month class. It was called Classroom to Career. And my girlfriend at that time, who is my bride of 37 years now, we said, hey, that would be a cool course. For 1 month, you help in a classroom. A, we thought it'd be fun. 2, we thought, what, easy credit, like no papers, no nothing. Just. And I was in the 5th grade elementary class, Miss Colors. At the end of that, I went to my advisor and said, I want to change majors. I just got that bug. But it was really fostered when I look back on it on. The teachers made an impact upon me, and you want to pay it forward. You can never pay back a great teacher. All you can do is whatever they invested in you, you hope someday you could help someone as much as they helped you. That's why I joined the profession. Why I've done different jobs, I've never had a career path. My philosophy has always been this. I joined the profession to help children. I joined the profession to help children be successful in their adult life. I will do any job in education that A, will help kids. B, I think I can do it effectively because what we do is too important for you to screw it up. And C, it does not come at the cost of the two things that are most important in my life, and that is my wife and my daughter. Any change I've made, there have been times I was offered promotions to do other things that either A, I didn't think I had the skill set for it, never went to the district office level. I don't think that's my skill set and where my passion is. Or I was once asked to become a high school administrator. High school people out there, thank you. But a high school is a religion. It's a life. A high school, something's always going on. To be an administrator there, you got to be at everything, I think, to really do it well. But that would come at the cost of my wife and my daughter. I didn't want to be away from home that much. So when opportunities have come, it's always been, can I do it well? Will it help kids? And will it not come at the cost of my own family? At some point, I moved into admin, honestly, for a raise. And I thought I could probably do it well. I went from classroom to AP to principal. And then it reached a point where I only left site when my daughter went off to college. I didn't want her to leave with a bunch of debt. 2 teachers or admin and a teacher as your parents, and your daughter is such a good student. She gets into Brown University and it's $50,000 a year. I could work more days consulting and working with adults. And why I didn't like going from teacher to principal is my passion's teaching. And you teach as an administrator. I think a good administrator teaches, but that's not your day job. You're putting out fires the whole day so that teachers can do their best work. I think great administrators create the conditions for teachers to do great work. And you try to take hits. You try to do as much as you can to keep things off their plate so they can focus on their teaching. But your day job isn't teaching. So when I went to consulting full time, that was me going back to my roots. I get to teach again. I'm going to teach adults. Teachers deserve PD in which you're doing best teaching practice. You should be a teacher's teacher. And I know you feel that way.
On this show, I don't believe I've ever told anyone I'm a fan of theirs, except you. Your style of teaching, your style of keynoting, you start with the hook, and it's very dynamic. For the audience, he's very reserved right now. He's just chilling. I'm breaking code right now. He's just chilling. But this man right here, he hooks you in the beginning very quickly, quick story. But then immediately he jumps into the outcomes, and then he does some direct instruction, 7 to 10 minutes, 9 minutes tops. Then he gives you something to do, not to turn and talk like most people do, but actually something where you're writing down, reflecting, you got your metacognition going. Then you say something to someone, but then he continues again. He makes sure everyone got the information before he gets into the next outcome. Honestly, I'm not sure why. I'm not sure how we don't do it this way, but this is the way to do it. When I saw you, it really affirmed things I'm doing. I learned a lot from you. Listening to you on other podcasts, I've learned a lot. You are my favorite keynote and my favorite presenter. And I've never said that before. Just letting you know that, sir.
I am honored and humbled. And so it does show you I was trained to be a teacher during Madeline Hunter times. Because our direct instruction, they are. I'm going to be really clear on the outcomes. I'll have an anticipatory set. When you teach teachers or learn with teachers, you better be good. And why? Because they can tell if you're a used car salesman, and they can tell good teaching. You can't fake it up there.
No.
I think that's the highest compliment that you could possibly give me, is to tell me that you think I'm an effective teacher. Thank you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Mike, you're doing a lot of work with your RTI at work model. What is the primary message of your coaching on RTI and the model?
Our approach. When I use the word R, I've been very fortunate in my career to have some people that have become dear colleagues, mentors, and friends. One of them is Dr. Austin Buffum. When I met Austin, he was superintendent of a neighboring district here in Southern California, and a PLC associate, was leading the PLC process at a high level in his district. We had a common mentor, Rick DeFore. Long story short, we were asked to do a training together in LA County Department of Ed. It was on the PLC process. And we're sitting at lunch one day, and Austin turns to me. It was a multiple day training. And he says, our district is trying to implement RTI as an effective research-based model to intervene when kids don't learn. And our teachers are like, do we have to give up PLCs? I thought we were doing PLCs. And he's like, no, they go together. And I kind of laughed and I said, Well, at our school, because I was a site principal and we were model PLC, I said, our teachers are doing RTI, but they don't know it. Not that we tried to trick them. It's PLC critical question 3. How do we, plural, we respond when kids don't learn? Our leadership team studied better ways to intervene, and we create a multi-tiered system of support. And then Austin turns to me and asks this question: do you think you could do RTI or MTSS, a multi-tiered system of support, if you didn't function as a professional learning community? I'm like, heck no. Heck no. Why? Because if you don't have a collaborative structure and culture, if you don't have a culture that you're past my kids, your kids, they're our kids, and embed collaboration time, because if we're going to respond, there has to be time for us to work together, to chat. And then if you haven't answered PLC question 1, what do we expect kids to learn? So you don't have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, no clarity on the most important things kids must learn. And if you're not collecting evidence of student learning in a systematic way, frequent common formative assessments, PLC question 2, I don't know how you respond. I don't know how you effectively, as the staff, target interventions in a timely way and in a collective way. And Austin says that would be a really good book topic, because some people are struggling to implement MTSS because they don't have the PLC foundation. Other places, they're implementing PLCs, but they're struggling with how do you respond when kids don't learn. So that was our very first book, Pyramid Response to Intervention. And ever since then, that is our model. So we're a couple of dozen books in now, going deeper into certain elements. But the whole premise is this, that PLCs and RTI or MTSS are not two different programs. It's not one thing on top of that. It's not one more thing on teachers' plate. They're complementary processes. And the PLC at work process, it's the foundation to the whole thing to make it work. And if we make that the foundation, it's like the foundation of a house. Then the structure you build above it, that pyramid of extra support, you have the school-wide capacity to be able to pull it off and do it in a way where we're working collaboratively. We're pulling on the collective strengths of our faculty, but the entire system is not dependent upon any teacher or teacher team to do it alone. You're leveraging each person's strength, each team's strength. So collectively, we can do great things. But the burden of a child getting there doesn't rest on a single teacher or a single special ed teacher or the resource room. You're a piece of the puzzle. Together, that puzzle is a beautiful mosaic of talent and ability that can be focused on the individual needs of each special child that we serve.
Now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to communicate better and even deal with social emotional stuff. They're having a bad day. A SmartLab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab.
I love how you connected RTI with PLC. Let's talk about your new book, Through Solution Tree, Learning by Doing, a handbook for professional learning communities at work.
Yeah.
Yes, that one right there.
That one.
That one right there.
Okay.
For someone new to PLCs, what do they need to know before reading this book?
First off, I got to give credit to where credit is due. New book, no, 4th edition of this book. And I've been a co-author since the 3rd edition. And of this incredibly powerful how-to resource, I can take credit for one chapter, and that's the intervention chapter, because a vast majority of this book was written by Rick DeFore, Bob Baker, and Becky DeFore. Sadly, we've lost two of those three leaders in this PLC work process. But this book represents 25 years of study and application, and I'm only a very small sliver of it. That said, because I don't like to take credit for things I don't deserve, and I'm not even sure if I deserve to have my name on the cover of this, barely. That said, what should people know? I'll go back to your first question on the history of PD. Why would a school or a district deeply and fully commit to being a professional learning community and specifically use the PLC at work process? And why? Because we have 25 years of ongoing building research. This is the best known way to organize a school or a district to ensure higher levels of learning for adults and for students. The premise of the PLC process is this: kids learn more when adults learn more. And it's great when a district can bring in someone like you or me to sometimes start a fire, to get some shared knowledge about a best practice or help them get better at a key element. But we know, and you framed it when you said, I need the leaders of a district or a school to know I'm a piece to help. I'm not transforming your school. It's what you do before and after, because it's going to take time, right? This PLC at work process, the key is embedding adult learning, not every now and then on a PD day, but what if every single week we're building collective efficacy, and not just on anything. It's not do we collaborate, but let's collaborate around the things that are proven to increase student learning the most. Like what? Like how about being really clear on what you want kids to learn? Like how about being really clear on who's getting it and who's not? Use evidence of student learning to be able to figure out what's working and what's not in our teaching and guide what we should study next instructionally to improve our bag of tricks, our tools on how we serve kids. And let's build systems of interventions and extensions. So when kids haven't learned what we deem essential yet, then how can we build time and support into the school day to not just catch kids up, but take kids farther? Common sense would tell us more kids would learn if we were clearer on what we want kids to learn. PLC critical question 1, what to expect kids to learn. Clearer on where kids are at. PLC question 2, how do we know that they learn it? Better at intervening. How do we respond when kids don't learn? Better at extension. All the years I taught, I was trying to do that in my own room, figuring out for my own kids. So you can say, let's collaborate. But how do we get great at these elements? This book is sold over 1 million copies from edition 1 to 4. Why? Because it breaks down step by step. How do you do it? It's built upon research, but beyond that, how do you do it? Show us step by step. Give us tools, ideas, predict what's going to trip us up, give us some answers. That's what this is. And it represents now, we were so lucky in the 3rd edition, a common friend that we have and someone who I think is just a giant in our field of education, Dr. Anthony Mohammed. He's joined us for the 4th edition. He's the global guru on school culture. He brought in his research about culture, and that's an ongoing thread throughout this entire book with his expertise.
Mike, he's one of the goats. He's one of the goats.
Because we continue to learn. And Anthony's deep level of research and application in that area to bring that element to provide more tools and clarity for schools, for districts committing to this process, I think makes the book all the more powerful. That's what that book is, and I'm just mighty proud to be associated with it at all.
Mike doesn't need me to back him up in any of this, but I do want to say one thing for all of our administrators, the people that are responsible for instructional leadership in schools. A lot has been done over the years as far as research goes for us to know what works in education. John Hattie for years has published about collective teacher efficacy, which Mike just brought up. So the effect size, I believe, is like 1.58. It's one of the most effective indicators. It's huge. It's one of the most effective indicators of how young people learn, how they're engaged, all the things that we need for them to learn. What are the behaviors that we see in the literature? Motivation, engagement, attendance, and academic achievement. They need to have little successes. Now, the one thing that I'll say is this. Why PLC works is because that efficacy, when we sit down together as a team and say, what do kids need to learn? How do we know they're learning? All the PLC questions Mike just said. When we do that together, we already know it works. And it's not just that. How do we help underserved kids? How do we make our staff feel more included? When we collectively decide that we're going to do this, we're going to naturally work out the kinks,
Yes.
our lack of collaboration, and do the things that we have to do.
Think about this. When you invited me to come to your podcast, I need to tell you, I love the name of your podcast. That's what we're talking about, right? We as educators, we need to be the students we want our students to be. Would you ever allow a kid to say, okay, I got it. I'm done. I've learned as much as I can learn. I am, right? Even as kids master new standards, you're like, okay, great, fantastic. High five. We ain't done yet. You never stop learning.
We're never done.
And that's what we're trying to be. We are trying to be the students we want our students to be. And when we invest in our learning, lifelong learning, we'll better serve our kids. And we're modeling for our students what it means to be a vulnerable, lifelong learner.
Amen. Mike, would you mind if I tell you why I named it Lifelong Learning Defined? Is that okay?
I would love to hear that.
Ever see Forrest Gump?
Oh, yeah.
Remember when Jenny dumped him for the very last time and the guy went running for like 3 years?
3 years.
In 2011, I had a major loss in my life. And up till then, I never had a major loss that I had no choice but to feel. There's emotional trauma and there's psychological trauma. So this was actually psychological. I was stuck in a very difficult emotion, PTSD. I had to deal with what it was. And anyone that has ever overcome a traumatic experience knows you have to feel it to heal it. There's no way around it. And if you don't feel it, you're not going to heal it. I went running with my work. I work at a district office. I was responsible for STEM and computer science, but our director at the time, rest in peace, Victoria Oakley, who just passed away, she was adamant on every instructional leader in the district visiting schools every 9 weeks, doing instructional rounds, looking at themes in the data, and then developing professional development based on what we saw. I took a deep dive into that because that was the only thing that would take my mind off what I was dealing with. 5 years into that journey of becoming a master teacher, of understanding what the leader needs to support learning, but what the teacher needs to do in order to induce learning, I defined my lifelong learning. I was reading Dr. Covey's book, and he said, you need to have your mission statement or your appetite, you need to have that written down. So I wrote Lifelong Learning Defined before the company was even thought of. And then as I started going into schools around the country for project-based learning, and I'm sitting with people, I started realizing that the deep dive I took, a lot of people haven't taken. So now my work is to help other educators define their lifelong learning, their personal and their professional growth. And that's how it happened. We added for self-improvement, and this is for all the edupreneurs that want to do podcasts, because educational podcasts don't really get hits, but self-improvement does. And that's really what it's for. My friend Tobias told me about that. So we added it to the.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I've earned a few gray hairs over the years. And would you agree with this statement? Wouldn't it be cool if in life we learn the most from our successes? But that's rarely the case. It's usually hard things in our life, because those hard things are the ones that force us to make some changes that if life was comfortable, I'm not sure if we would have the courage and the discipline to go through the journey you have to go through to come out on the other side, to be a little wiser, a little more enlightened, a little more healthy in our practice, a little more wise. For you to share that story, it's personal. So thank you for sharing it. And B, I'm not surprised. There are a few key things in my life that I think put me on a certain trajectory, personal and professional. They almost all came out of some of the hardest points in my life. But those are the moments you stop and reflect and say, what's really important and what do I need to do? What can I control that I need to do that would be better for myself and the people I love in my life?
What a perfect way to end this show. Let's put it in the universe. Mike, how can people find you so they can book you to speak at their conference, school, or event?
Contact me. I'm on X at Mike Mattos 65. 65, you can tell the year that I was born. My email address, mikemattos@me.com. If you want to formally work together, I do all my work through Solution Tree. I'm not an employee of theirs, but I just have the deepest level of respect for that company, what they stand for, their integrity about truly wanting to do what's necessary to help transform education worldwide. If you contacted Solution Tree and asked how we were interested in working with Mike Mattos, that would be the way formally I go about working with folks.
That's it for this episode. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast.
Whether you're a teacher or administrator, you lead by walking alongside your students and your staff. You teach them what to do, you model for them. Let's say you're in a situation where you don't know what to do, and you bring in a coach or a resource, you learn alongside them. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the second thing is this. Give your people feedback, not pushback. Whoever you push back on, whether physically or verbally, they're going to do it right back immediately. And if they're intimidated by our position, our status, they're going to do it behind our backs and ruin our programs. My guy. I want to leave you on this note. Trajectories can be changed. When I was in 10th grade, here's a snapshot of who I was in 10th grade. There's a rapper named Rakim. I'm not sure if you guys know about Rakim, but he used to say, it's not where you're from, it's where you at. And I played that on my headphones at 16 years old every day until I believed it. And I'm showing you this because I'm seeing versions of this throughout American schools. This is your reality of what you have to face. If I can do it, any kid can do it, but they have to work hard. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with George Valenzuela.